Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk, von Mensch zu Mensch.
Welcome to the Wizard of Art edition 17 with Bryan, Lahr, Magical Grimoires. Welcome.
What's up, Raphael? It's a great day here in Miami. Hope you're having an awesome day there as well. And it's just one of my favorite subjects. I love grimoires, and we're going to go over some of the few of the more famous ones and we've touched on a couple of those in the past. But I've got a number of books that are kind of obscure, and I'm looking really forward to talking about those. Before we get into the meat of the show, I wanted to check out like what's going on in the world where you're at, and see what's happening. Have the riots that are happening here affected anything going on in Austria with that?
It's kind of fun, have the riots started yet in Europe? So in terms of general assessment, or what I have seen or heard for Austria, there's not really anything happening. Just to let you know, your mic is turning on by itself, it seems. Thank you. There have been, however, just like, I guess also in America, there has been one so-called demonstration where suddenly there were 50,000 people in Vienna on one spot. That's at least what the organizers say. Maybe it's a bit less, but apparently it was like a lot of people. I wasn't there. Of course, no one kept the distance. No one was looking at the masks or whatever. So that's kind of interesting. In general, I always say
that point specifically, man. It just kind of like there's so many things going on right now that are just like this weird, out of balance scenario. It's like states are still shutting people down, like businesses can't open, and man, small businesses here are getting crushed, absolutely crushed, and so many people are out of work, and it's like, things really are at a point where they could begin opening back up again, but it's kind of like no, and enforcing like Newsom out in California. Now everybody has to wear a mask side except protesters. And it's like this.
A good one, right?
This group of people, hundreds of thousands of people getting together in one chunk, and it's like nobody says anything about that, and I don't really understand a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. It seems really disjointed and out of control, and it seems pretty much like people are using causes, to just further political ideas now, and it's kind of disturbing in a lot of ways,
Definitely. I'm not sure if it's really so different than what has happened before. However, I would say the idea that comes to mind is the potentiation of absurdity. And I'm thinking potentiation even is a way to describe the tarot cards in the Law of One by Lahr. I'm just going to see if I find this quickly. The potentiator, I think, is always associated to the fourth cards. It's the second. So the potentiator in tarot, according to the Law of One, the potentiator of the mind would be the High Priestess. Potentiator of the body would be 7, 8, 9, the Hermit. And the potentiator of the spirit would be, of course, the Tower cards. Maybe that's fitting as well. So very simply put, from what I could gather politically, it's simply that, as usual, individuals are being riled up and used as patsies to further political agendas, oftentimes not even really understanding what they themselves may be protesting for or not, or what the ulterior motives may be. That is my estimate. I'm not a great fan of demonstrations anyhow, to be honest. especially, of course, if it gets violent. And I guess what can also be seen, that's, of course, just one perspective, but it's interesting how different politicians, or obvious, let's say, simply act differently all around the world, but especially maybe in US, where you have, quite many states that at least have some autonomy. And what I find particularly interesting is that apparently even in US, you have 1, 2, 3 states that almost didn't lock down at all. I heard similar story from Switzerland, where they basically said, yeah, anyone who really wants to can wear a mask, but otherwise, you really don't have to, and it's kind of chill. So what's cool about it, I think, is it really reveals also on the local level who is like really corrupt, who for whatever reason may benefit from keeping things shut down and basically destroying small and independent business. So yeah, I think it's really great. And also, of course, one always has to look at the sources of funding and organization. There is, as far as I understand, a video by Project Veritas that is, supposedly more right-leaning or whatever, but anyhow, they just do investigative journalism and, put cameras to CNN producers that spill the beans and other interesting individuals, and apparently also infiltrated, I'm saying now, a quote-unquote, Antifa meeting, maybe not officially Antifa, but some kind of organizing group.
I
Right.
saw that. Yeah, it was intense.
And all I can say in terms of Austria or Vienna, I mean, there are, I was always wondering, there is, for example, a youth communist organization called Revolution, and I'm not hating on them, whatever, everyone can have their place, but it's just kind of interesting that they get housed in the middle of the city in a building that's, basically, let's say, sanctioned by the city of Vienna cultural department, where you have all kinds of, let's say, quote unquote, left-leaning associations, and they get their spot. I mean, it's nice to have their spot. Everyone should have a voice. But when you then know that this kind of black bloc idea exists everywhere, and this is not random people, but these are people that kind of get trained. There is examples even in the past from Germany where protesters get paid, and stuff like that. And it's just really important to put it into perspective. And as always, not just blindly believe some pictures of whatever one may see, but really, really, really do the research. So anyhow, in Vienna, of course, lucky Austria, in German they say Land der Seligen, so the land of the not the soulful, but like the lucky ones. So there is not too much happening. Honestly, I'm also not expecting there too much violence to occur or anything. But it's just interesting, as I said, the absurdity is increasing because obviously even what the quote-unquote government has said in terms of regulations then doesn't seem to apply with demonstrations, but still they try to enforce it in other places. It's also interesting, like supposedly in the public transport, you're still supposed to wear it. It's becoming less, or people are becoming, they're not just putting it on when they go into the station, but maybe only when they go into the train. I'm deliberately riding without any mask. Of course, I sit by myself as not to scare anyone, but I don't want to suffocate myself and get carbon dioxide poisoning for really no reason. And then what can happen is the local metro security came up and was like, oh, you have to have a mask, and I was like, no. And the other one was like, oh, you have to get out. And I was like, okay, I have a scarf. And I was like, yeah, it's okay. I put it up for a second. They went out.
It's
so,
funny.
I don't know.
Funny you mentioned that. Those paper masks are completely worthless for
the worst.
stopping.
Yeah. Anyhow.
And so I have a bandana that I wear, right? And I tie it around my face. I've got my sunglasses on and my baseball cap on when I go into stores. And I go up to the cash register like that. And I think about maybe 6 months ago, if I'd gone into a store like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's the armed robber, man. Call the cops. It's just so
And
bizarre.
maybe one thing we can talk about, aside from the idea of a political background, and maybe in some way Grimoires may even fit into this, talking about the idea of, I would say, managing perception. That is one idea that came up recently. If we would now say, and this is, unfortunately, let's say there's too much proof for this, but let's just take it as an assumption that there is some individuals, obviously in positions of apparent authority, because we give them authority, that may not have our best interests at heart, and at some level may even actually be, let's say, against life, or as some would say, satanic. And I'm now using that word just in the sense of deliberately confusing individuals. So what I then see is a really interesting state, whereas people are still conforming to different rules, even if it's just because they have fear of repercussion, but some certainly also still are afraid. And then to me, the interesting point is because there is no, like with many other things, there is no actual observable threat. There is only some images. And even in Austria, they've kind of proven that in official state broadcasting, they were showing pictures of, I was about to say sarcophagi, but that's not what it is, like the simple version for the commoners, to make everyone scared. And by now it's publicly known that our dear Chancellor himself had requested this to be sent to have people scared so they would comply. And the pictures were fake or from some other events. And, stuff like that is happening repeatedly. So the one thing I'm really wondering about or thinking about is if this is not also a great experiment in how much can you skew perception and what can you make people believe through, let's say, virtual media or just coming through a monitor without them actually having any real evidence for an actual threat. Like, for example, say, if in my building I would always hear someone coughing because they have, coronavirus and they're about to die or something, or if I would hear the sirens going off every 10 minutes because, someone has a breakdown. But none of that is happening. So it's interesting. Of course, the reason now is that's only because everyone is so compliant and this conforms so much. And that's how, they keep spinning the story. So I guess in overall, what I would like to say, another great example of seeing that there is actual threats, or let's say an actual diminishment of quality of life, whether that's due to inflation, whether that's due to too high taxes, too much regulation, bad laws, corrupt politicians, and many other reasons. Not self-responsible individuals, of course, ultimately is the reason. So there are all these real issues. And then what you can do is, as always, whether it's terrorists, whether you call it a virus, no matter how you call it, you create, as always, a fake threat scenario, and then even blame everything that happens because of the real threats, e.g. corrupt politicians, too high taxes, not enough self-responsibility. And you can shift the blame to whatever you just created. And along with that, of course, you offer the solution. It's, what David Icke always likes to say, and I like to repeat, this idea of problem, reaction, solution. You create a fake problem, even though there may be real problems that, contribute to it. And then because you have a new storyline, you give them a new solution, which simply, makes them more malleable, pliable, or conforming to whatever agenda you had in mind. So, fear is the mind killer. Do not fear. Let it pass over and through you. Where the fear has gone, only you will remain, to quote the litany of the Bene Gesserit from Dune.
Yeah, the pain, put it in the box. Oh yeah. So the thing that's really kind of just very disturbing to me is this kind of double standard of things that are going on. Like the first week of the riots, you know, they destroyed so much. It was supposed to be about Black Lives Matter and being upset that a guy got wrongfully killed, and that guy did get wrongfully killed. I don't think there's any reasonable person that wouldn't be upset about what took place with that. But even that, like that cop and that George Floyd guy, they were security guards at the same club, and there was history there. Yeah, it's not so black and white the way it's kind of been made out to be. There's a lot of subtext to that story. So this big thing blows up, right? And people are rioting all over, like many cities, and they're going through neighborhoods with Black-owned businesses and destroying those businesses, You know, there was
Black-owned, really?
yeah,
That's
there was
particularly smart.
there was a black 70-year-old retired police captain who was protecting a black-owned pawn shop. A friend of his owned the pawn shop, and he was there, going to protect him, and 7 guys blew up, shot him in the gut, let him lay on the ground and bleed out, and went in and destroyed and robbed the pawn shop. You know, I mean, there's been a dozen or so black people killed in this, and you know, how does that make even a shred of sense? I don't understand, you know, and it's got this double standard, you know, this is what we're about, but this is what we do kind of scenario. And then, you know, like in Seattle, they went up and like carved out a 6 square block chunk of the city, and they burned up and looted the police precinct, and all the police hit the bricks and got out of there, you know, and the big cry is to defund the police department. Yeah, defund the police department. That's going to really work. So over the last few weeks, this thing's been set up. They called it CHOP, like the city of CHOP, and it was a no police zone. And you know, it was supposed to be this utopian scenario, but within that scenario, they're now like carving out like they've got some areas for growing food. Well, they've cordoned that off. Like only people of color can grow food here. You know, white people have to go over here. You know, so
Wow.
even
I mean, how much more racist can you get?
well, yeah. So then a really good investigative reporter got inside Chopped and was talking to one of the people that is kind of, I guess, one of the leaders of that, and she was asking him, you know, what they want, and it's not about justice or change. It's about tearing the system down to the ground. That's what they want to have happen. So, of course, when you have, you know, people running amok with absolutely no authority to keep that in check, you know, there were lots of robberies, and 2 people wound up getting murdered. 3rd or 4th got shot this last weekend. So finally now the mayor is like, okay, we're going to go dismantle that and take that back. And it just, I mean, I could go on for the next hour with examples like that just to me make absolutely no sense. This a Black Lives Matter woman that was doing an interview, you know, and they asked her about the reverse, you know, the racist views of their own, and she was like, no, Black people can't be racist. And I'm like, wow, they really believe that, man. It's
That's
like
also a racist statement, by the way, no?
that's the most racist statement you could possibly make, you know, and condemning a whole, you know, all white people. You know, the thing that's kind of scary about the Black Lives Matter movement to me is that the top people that are associated with that are longtime followers of Louis Farrakhan. Are you familiar with him?
Interesting.
You know,
Actually, I am, and I have to say honestly, like from the speeches I saw and the conversations, I wouldn't even necessarily say I dislike him. Like obviously he's a talented speaker, and he brings up quite a few very interesting points to me. However, I can also grok or sense that there may unfortunately also be some slight idea of supremacy or whatever, sandwiched in there as well.
well, that really is not, you know, it's about dealing with the injustices towards Black people, but his intent is not for everybody to, you know, my dream would be, let's just all like be people and stop defining everybody by skin color and religion, and, you know, let's just be people. And, and conduct ourselves with each other with courtesy and respect, and let everybody have their own opinion and their views and do what the fuck they want, you know. But their mode is not, or at least Louis Farrakhan's, what a number of speeches I've heard of his, you know, he's been talking about not wanting that at all. That he doesn't want to sit on a stool in a drugstore next to a white person. What he wants is a black African American state or separate country, or, you know, he preaches segregation.
Interesting, because just now, I mean, that there is what comes to mind as you mentioned segregation. There is a whole super interesting rabbit hole to go down to in terms of South Africa. From the research I did, that even here the whole so-called apartheid, especially even with one particular white president, wasn't at all what it seemed, apparently, and actually only really got bad when the, I think, ANC, or I think they're called ANC, took over. And the other thing this kind of reminds me of is Israel. So in terms of whatever you say you may have been, or your ancestors even, or whatever, may have been victims of, you're now doing the same thing to whoever appears to have less power than you. And equally the idea of actually having a group that, if you want, you can identify through some similarities, like, for example, you know, religion or skin color. In case of Israel, of course, technically it would be religion. And you actually have a country, as I understand, that actually has quite good relations, and where there is actually peace and people get along. And then you rile them up and you try to put into their heads that they need their own state where they can only affiliate with their own. And also again put in this supremacy idea, which, or exclusivity idea, let's just say, exclusion idea, which was exactly what you had been criticizing before. So I think psychologically it's actually super simple to see through that charade.
Okay, here's the perfect example of what you're talking about. You know, the whole slavery thing just keeps, you know, getting brought up, and people are trying to like push reparations and all this kind of thing. And I was doing some research into that fact, and ran across the information about Liberia. Are you familiar with how that country came about and what's happening there now? It's kind of a crazy scenario. Like, after the Civil War, all the slaves are freed, and they're all looking for work, trying to figure out what do we do now? You know, where we were living, they were brought to plantations or wherever, and that was their life. You know, they weren't like acclimated to going out and making a living or trying to live here. And there was a movement at the time. Liberia was a colony of the United States. I don't think it still is, but it was at that time. So somebody had the bright idea, let's you know, send them there and help them, and have them help run that colony for us, and maybe turn it into a state. So the first thing that happened when they got to Liberia is they enslaved the native people of Liberia, and separated the whole chunk into you know, warlord sections, you know, and that's still the way it is today. And it's like, guys, you know, it's like people of every color. There are really good people and there are scumbags, man, and you can't lump a whole race, you know, into one anything. I mean, think about white people that you know, just that chunk. Do I know 10 white people that are exactly the same? Hell no. You know, it's like everybody's different. I connect to some. I don't want to be anywhere near others. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that they're white or black or green or yellow or any other color. It has to do with how they conduct themselves interacting with me and what they do. And it just seems really out of skew, and people are so easy to and quick to latch on to the catchphrases and the propaganda on it, and do little research into it. And I am absolutely gobsmacked and dumbfounded at the way that okay. This isn't the Black Lives Matter thing. This is a whole different thing. When we were having I don't know if you heard about this, we were having a new nomination for Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh, who I happen to, aside from that process, had known a good bit about him through the last 20 years or so. And I found him to be a really progressive conservative and a super fair guy, man. I mean, it's like so fair. And one of the, like all of his staff is women, are women, So he's in this whole thing, he's getting grilled. This woman shows up with claims from like when they were in high school, and supposedly he committed some sexual atrocity, and it spurred that whole Me Too movement, like all these celebrities coming out. We have to believe all women, it doesn't, whatever they say, they have to believe. So that sort of blew over and was kind of like cruising along. And then some really serious allegations against Joe Biden came up by a woman who's not a Republican, by a woman who's a Bernie Sanders supporter, and some really serious claims that have been verified in a number of different directions, really specific dates and times. And, she told her mother about it way back then, and other people about it. And it's really well known. And all the same people that were saying, well, you just got to believe people, you just have to believe women, are now like going, well, what about due process? You're innocent until proven guilty. And it's like, because that was their selection, now those rules just change. So there's not really, it doesn't really seem like there's deep ethics that people really believe in with all their heart. It seems like whatever needs to be said to prove my point or win my particular battle right now. And I think that's such a dangerous zone, man. It's such a double standard, and I don't know how that actually gets resolved. And the whole social media thing, has really fragmented us, and the whole idea of everybody segmenting into groups, all of which then feed their own ideology, and now they're separate from everybody else.
Yeah.
I think we've created this scenario that is very difficult for people to live together, equally and with opportunity and choice and freedom, and it's now become this like segmented warring factions, with everybody trying to claim preferential treatment for whatever their group is. And I'm not singling out any one of them. I'm like addressing that across the board, man. It's like all these individual ideologies that demand supremacy, and it's kind of scary.
And I guess this is actually the basis of any spiritual understanding, that, once you get to your own point, knowledge and especially wisdom, then you also realize that everyone is entitled to have their own view, there is no point and actually no real possibility except scaring or tricking anyone to force them to believe or do whatever you believe. And the other thing is talking about maybe the basic idea of creator consciousness is that if you are truly aware of your own powers, then you would not seek to get this kind of, let's say preferential treatment. And I'm all for the idea of, reducing especially negative assumptions about any group, which anyone may be susceptible to all variants of conditioning. However, what I really, at least almost don't see at all, is anyone who actually gets to know someone else that they then, still complain about their race or whatever. But just as you mentioned, and even in the Bible it says, judge a tree by its fruits. It can be that simple. It's not about any type of color or identification, but it's really always about the actions and the behavior. And that's actually real simple. And there we can apply at least very, very similar ideas to everyone. And then we'd have, a very simple guideline where we don't need to become confused or, again, like you say, claim supremacy. There's three, four things I'd like to mention because you talked about the slaves. And even though we're getting kind of off topic, but probably it's all, will fit right in somehow. So you mentioned the slaves and that maybe they didn't really know what to do when they first got enslaved and suddenly got free. What I always like is the idea that slaves actually at least had to have, and I'm not saying that they had great conditions, I wasn't there, I have no clue, but at least they had to have accommodation and be given food, and at least, I guess, be somewhat well fed and healthy if you want to use them on a field as a workforce. But then, of course, the great trick was, now you're free. But since it's a debt-based system and there's many other mechanisms that basically drain you of your energy, you're not actually free at all. You have to get your own accommodation, and maybe you're not even going to get a proper place, but have to live in some even much worse barracks. So it's the illusion of choice and the illusion of freedom that is then hailed as the great progression in terms of abolition of slavery, even though we have, let's say, non-100% conscious and consensual and preferred relationships and work happening everywhere all the time. So too many people, to many different degrees, still are, in a sense, enslaved, let's say. And just briefly in terms of history, I understand correctly that in the supposed, because even here there's different storylines, especially in terms of the Tartaria and alternative history research, what the Civil War actually is. But as far as I understand, the northern states in the official history were fighting against the southern ones, and the northern states won. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And
Okay.
the whole gig with the northern states where they were trying to abolish slavery, and that's Abraham Lincoln, and
Right.
he really drove that. And the whole gig was abolishing slavery altogether. And the southern states were, their whole economy, everything about what was going on then was built on that. And people in the South are kind of cantankerous and stubborn people, and they
Texas,
weren't about to give it up. Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, all of those along through there.
So then just one quote, because even here I heard different stories in terms of why this actually happened, because as we understand the issue being, history is always written by the winners. So whoever wins will depict themselves favorably in retrospect or simply change history so that their current political argument seems strongest. I'll just read one sentence from Henry David Thoreau's Walden, who, as I understand, also was strongly against slavery. And the one amazing book I read by him is called, as I said, Walden, about natural and perennial philosophy. And there he says, "It is hard to have a southern overseer. It is worse to have a northern one. But worst of all, when you are the slave driver of yourself."
Oh, wow, that's so true. Walden, that's a great grimoire right there.
Oh, exactly. Maybe that's the segue in terms of Grimoires, if you're ready to switch it up. So maybe this
Sure.
may be one very simple example, maybe not the most let's say outwardly magical, but as they say, don't judge a book by its cover. And I guess at least Thoreau is really known for his perennial, or as they call it, transcendental philosophy. Very much, I would say, nature-based, very simple observation. Basically a guy going into the woods back then when apparently this was still possible, that you could just, go into some random forest, build your shack and actually be pretty much left alone and like grow your beans or something, which is, amazing. And, yeah, really, really great reflections of self-sufficiency, I would say self-empowerment, non-conformity, individuality, and, yeah, making your own life, forging your own path.
Exactly. Exercising God's greatest gift, which is freedom of choice. Yes, exactly. Awesome. Well, do you want to play a piece of music and then get into the grimoires, or you want to
Totally.
dive right in? Okay, let's do that.
A date with divinity.
Awesome. Awesome. As always. Yeah. All right, so we're going to get into talking about grimoires today, and I guess the first place to start is, what is the definition of a grimoire? And those are the magical journals of whatever magical person is experimenting with and learning with. I've been keeping a grimoire of my own. There's actually a picture in the news feed of the case that it's in for about 30 years now. And that very first one, I made the whole book from beginning to end. I made the paper that's in, or most of the paper inside of it, and like from scratch, like built this thing because it imbued it with a sense of sacredness and purity towards that one goal for me. So that was really important to me, and wound up being something I'm very, very happy that I did.
And just before I forget it, there is synchronicity strikes again. So yesterday night, let's say watching random things, I also sometimes really enjoy particular Japanese animation, and there is one very recent, apparently quite popular show called Black Clover. And there's a few series I really like. There's nothing really I enjoy right now, so I was looking around, checking out different things. So I check out this show. As ever so often, it involves magic and all of these things, especially the Japanese and animation seem to have a knack for that, which is awesome. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna watch this first episode, see what it's about. And what was it about? It's about, let's say, magician friends, or let's say it's about a society where almost everyone can use magic. And in the very first episode, it's about setting up the scene, and those teenagers, let's say, going to the tower to meet the master of the lore or something, and everyone attending gets their magical grimoire being flown to them from the shelves, basically. So it was exactly about grimoire. So yeah, so much for that. Anyone who wants an animated idea of that can check out Black Clover, the animation.
Awesome. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between. I was hanging out with a witch friend of mine this weekend, and we were talking about the difference between a book of shadows, which is classically associated with witches, and a grimoire. And her viewpoint on that was that a book of shadows is really like almost like a personal diary, where very, very just deeply personal information is put down, probably stuff that you wouldn't want to share with anyone else. and the grimoire part of it is more about the spells and the processes involved in those. And I sort of get that, but my grimoire and a lot of the ones that I know about are a combination of both of those things. Like I keep a digital grimoire now. I filled up the book that's in the case that's on the news feed, and started a new one about maybe 10 years ago, and it's a digital version now. And because it's in the computer, and I fill mine up with thoughts, and go back, years later and make new notes in different colors in my old book. I do that in the new grimoire too, as I learn and discover new things, go back and revisit things and make addendums and update stuff with new knowledge. But man, it's super, super personal, and it's a scenario where you really want to keep that book very, I don't know, you want to be very careful who gets to see that. So one of my teacher is big about creating his own alphabet and writing his notes in his journal in an alphabet that no one would know, which is really very cool. I'm in the process of working on that myself. I've got a whole alphabet design that I've been using to make sigils and it's 81 characters, a 9x9 square. And, but I haven't gotten to the point where I can really write fluently with it. So the way I solve that scenario is, since it's in the computer and, it's part of in my design software scenario, I found a really obscure font that are hand signs, the hand signs that deaf people use to sign words and letters. And I convert everything that I write in that book into those hand signs and leave it like that, and then take the font somewhere else, so that if you got into it by accident, you would have, it just looks like a bunch of weird hands. So that's turned out to be a really cool way of keeping that private and guarded and sacred, and it's not so much that you're trying to keep secrets from somebody else, but when you really go deep and you touch the deepest parts of yourself and connect that with the light and that learning, that's a really, really personal interaction. And it's nice to keep that private and secure. Yeah. And I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but I'd be happy to send you a first chunk of pages, maybe the first 100 pages of my grimoire, and let you take a look at it and see what you think. I think that would be really fun.
For sure.
I'd feel really good about sharing that with you. I keep track of all of my all of the things I look into. Like I've got a whole section on mudras and prayers and mantras, and the tarot deck, of course, numerology. The rune section is huge. And so it's really great to go back and look at something that you wrote 10 years ago and see from a totally different perspective that same information, and what was important then, and what's important now really rarely ever are exactly the same. But I would encourage anyone listening that is on the path or thinking about getting on the path, to make that, keeping notes about your experiments, and especially when you're going off to do something that's kind of your own exploration, where you don't have an example from a pre-existing grimoire or magic book to just copy that. Although it has been fun to go back to some of the more ancient ones, like the Heptameron and Agrippa and those guys, and try some of those things with a 21st century outlook. That's been really cool. But I can't stress enough the goodness associated with having those things written down and kept track of. I don't know about you, but my memory's okay. But as time marches on, that the fog of where that was, 10 years ago, it's kind of hard to remember. But when you were able to go back and get your notes from a particular day 10 years ago and see what you were thinking and the tone of your voice, just writing what you're writing out, and the expressions that you use and the energy that you poured into writing at that time gives you this really kind of clear blast back into where you were at that time. And I think those are really fruitful things to do, to go back and check out where you were on the path. And so, Raphael, do you keep a grimoire yourself?
Well, there were times when I partially did that, especially in the time when, let's say, there was a lot going on and I was still trying to sort things out. Now I've kind of ceased keeping notes in that particular way, because I feel it's not necessary. However, when I was just formulating concepts within myself and didn't have the clarity I have now, I certainly did. And I wrote only, let's say, about 70 pages of notes or something within the few months. So it's not so much. But what I also did, which I actually highly recommend, journaling at all, like to anyone, especially if you're confused or something. It's just like with tarot, it allows the thoughts to crystallize and then you can reflect on them more clearly. And also dream journaling, of course, which during that time assisted me greatly. So right now, not doing it, but I definitely did that to some extent.
Yeah, I found when I'm exploring new areas that I really don't have any, I've heard about, but don't have any experience with, or when I'm creating I do that a lot now, using things that I've learned over the years and diving into areas that I don't see any written information about in any direction. I'm glad that I keep a record of those and have those to go back and refer to. It's kind of it's a shame to lose that stuff in my opinion. So anyway, so let's get into talking about some of the grimoires. I've got about 10 of them here that I were very influential in my learning, and a few that are really obscure that not that many people know about, and one that is just a what the fuck, a crazy one. So some of the really early, well, okay, let's start with some of the ones that people really know about, and I go to Crowley's. It's Liber Book 4, Liber Abba, I believe it is. That's kind of considered to be Crowley's kind of magnum opus. And he explored so many different venues of different cultures, combining yoga and Hermeticism. He went back into the medieval grimoires. He got deeply into Eliphas Levi, which I don't know if you've ever read any of Eliphas Levi's stuff, but he was writing at a time when you could get burned, for exploring this. So much of his stuff is housed in um, metaphors and kind of little trips here and there to, like, if you don't have background information, you would think that meant a completely different thing. But he's one of the most influential magicians of the modern time, and Crowley really dove into his work a lot, and the hell, people don't talk about this a lot, but Helen of Blavatsky, with the whole her whole exploration, the Rosicrucian thing, and that was a really big influence on Crowley as well. And that book was very detailed in laying out specific rituals and the tools that you would need, and the process of accomplishing those. And I learned a lot about my ritual practice, although I don't really execute that now. But for a long time, that it was a really good foundation for going off and exploring my own stuff. And I would probably say Crowley has been the most influential metaphysical magic person certainly of this century. Have you ever done any of his workings, Raphael? I know you've read a bunch of his stuff, but have you ever tried doing any of his rituals?
Yeah, I only checked out, I had one of the books at some point, which I guess I gave away. I checked out some of the descriptions of some of the rituals online, though from what I could gather, I understand why, but they were like a bit too intricate and complicated as to my taste, basically.
Yeah, he does wrap it up in a lot of dogma as well. That's kind of my bitch with Western, the whole Hermetic scenario, the Golden Dawn. It was so much about the dogma of it and the exactitude of the hand positions and the voicing of the God names, and I found that to be kind of restrictive. In a way, it's sort of like the Catholic Church in black robes. And I didn't continue on with that mode in my current work, but certainly an amazing foundation. Another book that we've touched on briefly before, and was a huge influence on Crowley. As a matter of fact, he moved, I can't remember the name of the house now, but he moved to a house on a lake in Switzerland that actually Jimmy Page wound up buying back in the 70s. And he moved there to do the Abremelin workings. And the book is called The Book of Abremelin, the Sacred Book of Abremelin the Mage. And that book, very profound for me, because that was the first time I really entertained the thought of, well, it's not just light, it's not just dark, it's the combination of both of those. And it's like a 6-month ritual. And man, talk about process and dogma, man, that is rife with it. But his whole mode was first of all a time of purification, really intense purification, followed by the first working, which would be contacting your guardian angel, and then the angelic hierarchy, and having that connection with that world. And then the second half of that was summoning the dark princes and the devil and the demons associated with that, and having dominion over those, so that they are not wreaking havoc in your own life. And that's brought about by invoking the light and the Word of God and and the help from the angelic realm that you attach to already, and the combination of both of those forces um, seem to be an amazing balance to me, because it isn't all about, you can't have the shadow without the light. And those two things are inextricably linked in the physical world and in the metaphysical world as well. So having the broad range of all of those was really important to me, and to Crowley as well. And I would, and that was also one of my first exposures into magical squares, and using those to have kind of instant effect scenarios. So a really lengthy section in that book about magic squares and how those are produced, and how to use those, and what their functions are. Super good book, piece of information. So one of the let me do this one first. The Heptameron. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Yeah, that was written by a guy named Pietro di Abano. And he died in prison during the Inquisition. They didn't burn him; they just threw him in a hole, let him rot there. And it was something he believed in, something called planetary magic, and it was a way that you could conjure the angels for like each day of the week, and you know. Curiously enough, with that as his magical foray, he was accused of atheism, and that's the reason he was thrown in jail. So, wow, kind of a crazy thing. Um, it was a really influential book, and that was written in like. Let me see here. I got that. That was written in 1257. And over the years, that book wound up becoming super influential in so many other grimoires that have come to pass from them. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the Heptameron, which was published in 1496. And a good bit of what is contained in that grimoire also came from the Book of Oberon, and yes, no, the Heptameron, yes, and the Book of Oberon was written in 1577. The Lesser Key of Solomon derived a good bit of information from the Heptameron, and the Lesser Key of Solomon is probably one of the better known grimoires out there, and really deals mainly with demonic spirits and lower vibration spirits. But that's been a key element in lots and lots and lots of Western magic, yeah, for sure. And then the Book of Treasure Spirits, which is a funny grimoire, and it's not very well known, but its whole purpose was to be able to summon whatever spirits, angels or demons, that could help you locate treasure of any kind, and that grimoire also used a bunch of stuff out of the Heptameron. The Grimoire of Pope Honorius. I never can say that last name right. Honorius. Yeah. That pulled from it the Book of Raziel, a book that was really key in my early learning by a guy named Barrett, called the Magus. Are you familiar with that book? You might be.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that was written in 1801. The 6th and 7th book of Moses, which are curiously enough, psalms from the Bible that are put to use for magical use, and that pulled from that as well. So the Heptameron is an amazingly influential book in many, many, many ways, and would strongly. I think you would enjoy, just even a casual breeze through that. It's easily available as a PDF on the internet, and you can grab it and scope it out. I think that just as having a background to the subject of magic, that's a real cornerstone piece. The Picatrix. Now that is a really. Are you familiar with that? The aim of the sage, the Picatrix. Yeah, it's the largest grimoire in history, and is like um, it's like the quintessential tome of 11th century Arabic magic, and it contains tons and tons of spells that do everything that you could possibly want to do, like how to poison somebody by sleep or gaze or work, acquiring love, all the usual stuff, escaping from prison, healing, healing a scorpion sting or a black widow bite, just tons of stuff like that. It's about I think it's like a 400 and something page document, and it was originally written in Arabic, and it concerns itself really with celestial magic, and there's really no particular author that it has been ascribed to, and most historians, ascribe that to some unknown apprentice of a Middle Eastern magic school, and kind of the core theme of that is obtaining and being able to channel energy from the planets of the cosmos. So some of the early forays into uh, astrology and how to use those energies um, are that has come as some of the first exposures to that, and that also just borrows a lot from numerology, which is the reason I really got attracted to that, and also again some of the early astrological things to use as guides for the cosmos, and one of the interesting things in that is that it has a ton of bizarre recipes. It's really the only grimoire I know that is concerned with food and making certain concoctions and foods that you eat. Normally, you're blending together all these materials for a spell that you don't really consume. You usually burn them or bury them or do something else with them. But these recipes all included different things that were intended to be ingested, like ingredients of all manner of like bodily fluids and my favorite, psychoactive plants. That was a huge part of this for the for how he proceeded, So I wanted to. It's 4 books, and I've got kind of like the chapter outlay for these that I'd really enjoy sharing with you. In book 1, it's of the heavens and the effects they cause through images made under them, and it's understanding what degree you are, and that would be. Not a degree of where you are, but an astrological degree and where that is. A definition of what is magic and what its properties are. chapter 3 are what are the heavens and what are they made of, which was I found really interesting as it goes into talking about the things that the heavens are made of, and using the terminology of the time. If you apply that to what we're discovering in physics and the explosion of information that's happening about our cosmos and universe and multiverses in general, it's kind of interesting that they use different words, but we're kind of on the same wavelength.
But what's interesting, if you checked it out, is there any reference within it in terms of, let's say, quote unquote, the potential shape of the earth, or also what they call the firmament, which I believe, at least in the Bible, is quite an established idea?
It talked about the firmament a lot, but not really so much the shape of the earth, or at least I didn't run into that. But that'd be interesting to go back and kind of look and see what's there. Chapter 4 was of the kinds, properties, and compositions of the heavens needed to make images of the mansions of the moon. Yeah, really, really great. Mansions of the moon, that's an area of exploration that's pretty interesting too, and that was a really Arabic kind of concept that got put forth. Let's see. In what degree is the microcosm, and how is it assimilated into the macrocosm? Loved that chapter, yeah. And the last chapter in book 1 is in what degree anything in the world is, and many other profound things hidden by the wise that we propose to reveal in this book. Oh man! But the in what degree anything in the world is a very, 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 very useful tool. Yeah, let's see. Book 3 is of the properties of the planets and signs, and of their figures and forms made in their colors, and how one may speak to the spirits of the planets and many other magical workings. That was kind of my first foray into trying to do that myself, which took a long time, but wound up being something pretty cool. But I used this book a lot for that. Chapter 1 is of the parts of the planets that proceed into plants, animals, minerals, and many other things, being an explanation of the virtues of the planets and of doing what you wish by their seals. So it is totally about the manifestation of planetary energy in this plane. Yeah, let's see. Chapter 7 is of attracting the powers of the planets and how it's possible to speak with them, and how this is done for each planet, including the figures, offerings, prayers, incenses, proportions, and state of the heavens necessary for each planet. So it gives you a really good time. And, I'm big of incenses, and the ones that are kind of, their frequency is appropriate to whatever working. Well, a perfect example is both my angel deck and my tarot deck. All of those images were constructed, especially in the tarot deck, where for the first 20 of the major arcana cards. I dug into finding out what incense was most appropriate to that, and some of them are difficult to find, but it was really worth it. And it's not that the incense in and of itself really causes anything to happen, but it just helps with the environment and setting up a unified frequency flow that then you can tap into, which really, really awesome. Let's see. We'll skip on down through some of those. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, one thing before I get off of that, I had this discussion with somebody that's very big into astrology, and I expected him to have a different point of view, but over the years, but he actually agreed with me, which I was shocked and surprised about. Over the years, I never could figure out how the planet, like the actual planet, say Jupiter, how the planet Jupiter actually affects my daily life. Is that gravity? What is that? And where I've come after 30 something years of exploration is I think the physical planets are metaphors for that system that's inside you, an energetic system. And that it's not really the things that are where the planets are in the actual sky, because, depending on what system of astrology you're using, whether you're using tropical or sidereal, if you're using sidereal, I'm not an Aquarian, I'm a Capricorn. Things that the stars are in completely different positions. Right? Yeah, they're in completely different positions than they were when that was originally put forth. So I think that because I had so accepted those premises and absorbed those methodologies, that now is a system that operates inside me, and it's not necessarily related to where the physical planets are in the world. Although, like Mercury is retrograde right now, man, and I can always tell you when Mercury goes retrograde, not by looking at the calendar or anything, but there is a feel in the air that I am particularly attuned to. That and the last sliver of the crescent waning moon. Man, that day kicks my ass. And it's like, wow, what is up with this? And I've been dancing around. I don't like being subjected to energy that I'm not in control of, that is sort of got me by the short hairs, and for the longest time, I couldn't figure out, like, this one day of month, I would just feel like I was trying to run with cement shoes on. I'm tired, I'm cranky and bitchy and like irritable and like, man, I'm just awful day, even though I'm having a great day. I'm having an awful day. My perspective just sucks. And I wound up, through my initiation in Ifa, one of the things that you learn in that are what are your osobus, which are the things that are negative for you, and what are the things that are positive for you. And one of the top things on my negative list to watch out for is the last sliver of the crescent moon. So I did some digging into that, and because I kept journals all that time, I was able to kind of go back through a number of years each month and go, oh my God. And I'd look it up and yep, it was a crescent moon right before that went to take place. So as I've gotten better at channeling my own energy and acquiring ability to use my own personal energy, I keep doing a number of things that I was hoping would help with that. But, it's like I can tell that when that day shows up every freaking month. And my teacher and I were talking about this, trying to figure this thing out, man, because he's noticed it too. He goes, just like I'll say hello, a couple sentences. He goes, oh man, it's the crescent moon, isn't it? And I said, yeah, how can you tell, man? It's just the tone in your voice. I'm like, wow, it's that obvious. Okay. So I did a really intense search into what were the energies that were happening on the day of my birth. And it was super cold. I was born at 3:18 in the morning. And it was also the gibbous moon, the waxing gibbous moon, which was the last little sliver before the moon went completely full, which on the flip side of that is like my best day of the month, man. If I'm doing something that requires like to be able to gather everything I know and focus to drive something I'm trying to do, man, that's the day I pick to do it because I'm usually on fire on that day. And it was such this epiphany when I look back and go, oh my word, man, my Osobu is exactly like the opposite of my Ashe, my goodness, and really, really curious. But again, I think those are concepts. I think that energy happens inside you. I don't think that really has anything to do with the actual physical moon. Although the physical moon is more likely to cause energetic changes because you do in fact feel that gravity, and I mean the pull of the moon causes the tides and like all kinds of physical effects here. So I could maybe buy that a little bit more, but like Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, wow, how are those affecting me? Do you have any opinion about that yourself, Raphael?
Well, simply by the idea of understanding, in my perspective, that everything is a projection of consciousness and we are already complete holographic representations of everything as individuals. Therefore, this also means that anything I can see within the outside must be a resonant representation of myself as well. So the way I kind of see it is like an, astrological clock. And of course, also agree with the idea that astrology in that sense is not prescriptive, but descriptive. And there may certainly be energies felt collectively. And as we know, they say, millionaires don't have astrologers, billionaires do. And even if you look at, even now, even with the, let's say, supposed, let's call it, race riots now or something, even now there's some very special alignment that happened, I think, a few decades ago or 100 years ago, where there was like a similar situation. So these things appear to be recurring or appear maybe even to be used and exploited. So I think it's great to be aware of it, and especially if you can kind of measure it like you did, just to notice. But then, of course, to understand that, one is never a victim of it, but these are just, representations of collective or also individual energies. And anyhow, they only matter to the extent that I therefore change my own response, because the free will choice always remains. And even if I'm not having such a good day, I can still choose to make the very best of it, and
That's
especially
true.
And especially when you're aware of it, you can create some more buffers, or just know, okay, that day I'm just gonna chill out and stay home, or whatever is appropriate. So yeah,
What's interesting is that, I tried lots of different methods. One of them was to try to really kind of jack myself up the 2 or 3 days before that so that I had this really great wave going through it. That was not effective. And then I went through this period of time where I just wasn't going to acknowledge it. No, that's not real for me. I choose something different, and I'm making my reality different based on my desire, rather than, as you say, being a victim or being, subjected to something that's uh, outside of my choice and control. And I would do my best just to forget about it. And I'd be cruising along. My usual mode is I'm in a pretty good space. One of my marching things is, happiness is a choice, not a condition. And it's your choice to be able to be happy inside, and to have that be a state of your being rather than a response to some outside stimulus that's making you happy or making you sad. I mean, certainly those things affect you, but if you're allowing your happiness to ride on the wave of energetic things that take place in the world, you're going to have a rocky ride indeed. So
oh, yeah.
I would make the conscious effort just to completely put that out of my mind. And I I'd have kind of a crappy day. I really wouldn't think about it, and I'd feel good the next day, and I'd go, "Oh man!" I'd go back and check, and yep, it was that day. Have you, Mark? We haven't inserted you here. Have you had any experience with grimoires yourself, or do you keep one yourself?
Yes, I want to thank you, Bryan. I read your homepage, and it's great to be in contact with an English speaker of Miami, a magician by these days.
Who'd have thought, right? Anything you want to share on the topic we're on right now? I get talking too much, man. I've sort of just been blathering about, so I wanted to, invite you to share whatever.
Oh, it was quite interesting. I was astonished how many literature is already there to mention. But I also was reading that you are open for new ways, so I could explain what I do with my little magic here in Germany.
Yeah, yes, please.
I make huge magic sticks to walk with it, and I give it away. I make also wood coins for your hand, for everybody. As a present, I had made 500 pieces. In every coin is special. An angel already told me I live longer for that. You can't buy this with money. I take no money. I just want to be in contact with people. The wood coins, and I show you one in the chat if you want.
Yes, please.
They are very simple made. You just need a wood, an ast. I don't know how to spell this. A wood,
like a branch,
and a burning stick to make some motif on it.
Guess you're picking particular woods based on what the purpose of the coin is. Is that true?
Yeah, there is a simple.
Oh, nice! There it is. Yeah, beautiful.
There is a simple creation way. At first, there was the birke. It's a white black
birch.
That's the first tree of all trees, and then there is the eiche and
oak.
Yes, and the maple. It's for me especially very important. But what I want to tell you is that these wood coins are in its advantages. They are unique. They are eternal objects with luck. They are for some higher consciousness a telephone. They can feel what you put in there. They are regional work, social connection. You can check out if the other party, whether it's injured party. You can check out the next person. It's a keepsake, firm in faith of steadfastness. I translated it. It's art, small, with a big impact. It's a motive at the choice of the recipient. Also, the recipient is the teller of the, I don't know, I'm zodiac. My zodiac is also Witter.
That is Aries.
Yes, and flatterer for reassurance hat übersetzt. A gift, a souvenir, and a symbol to connect with the others.
Awesome. I'm curious as to how you select your symbology.
How I collect the symbology?
Wie du die Symbole aussuchst. Also nach welchen Kriterien du aussuchst, was du drauf gibst.
Also I talk to the person especially when he has no idea. Then he loves the film The 300 of Europe. I put on this face that is very strengthful. When he has really no idea what is his preference, then I say, what is your zodiac? And most of all, the people say me the zodiac. In I think 10% of the cases, the person is not interested in the motive. Then there is no engagement in the social manner, or I can be creative by my own. But that's certainly in 10% of the cases of 500 wood coins.
Are each of the coins individual, like different designs and with different purposes? And do they have specific purposes, or are they a broader bringer of luck or fortune or whatever?
Yes, I make a prayer when I burn them. They are handmade, so they are all individual.
Awesome.
You can put in something to tell the people that you believe in. By example, Goddess Army, or I tell here in my family is the founder of Purple to find in humanity, and so on. So that's my idea. I give you an URL later. Yes.
I'm sorry, say that again?
And just a website. He's giving it a website later. URL, Uniform Resource Locator.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else in terms of grimoires in particular, or you got basically through all the most important books?
No, actually, I've got way too many to go through, but there are a couple more that I want to bring up because they're kind of cool. This next one is
we can always do more shows to expand upon them, but I guess it's good to at least mention them now.
Well, yeah, I've got two more that I want to discuss, and I think we have time for that. So, the first one is called Aura Linda book. Have you ever heard of that one? This is really
Aura Linden book.
Yeah, it's OERA Aura Linda book. Yeah. It's an old Frisian book that it purports to contain like wisdom dating back like 4,000 years. Let me see in my notes here. I think it goes back to like 2194 BCE, which is old, man. That's an old grimoire.
Just for reference, because I'm looking at it on Wikipedia. I mean, I really have no clue about this, but just in terms of, I guess, wiki bias. So it says it was written from this and that time, and then second sentence already. Among academics in German philology, the document is widely considered to be a hoax or forgery. Yeah, sure.
Well, there's a reason for that, and it's purportedly to be include the teachings from the mythical Atlantis, which is one of the things that got me kind of gung-ho about it, but the fucked up part about it, it was a favorite among Nazi occultists, and it sort of got tainted with this kind of nastiness, this epic creepiness, I think was the word, and some even refer to it as Himmler's Bible. So it got kind of like pushed off and denigrated because of that association. But it really has nothing to do with anything the Nazis were about. They tried to, well, those bastards like hijack some of the greatest symbols, like the swastika, dude, is an ancient symbol of prosperity and movement, and it about that of a goodness. And since they hijacked it, now it's like the symbol of the ultimate evil.
I mean, anyone can think of any symbol whatever they like, but just to point out in terms of co-optation, of course, the Catholic history, I guess, has a great history of mixing and matching whatever they like and, put their own version of supremacy on top of any type of quote unquote indigenous religion they may have found. And just in terms of symbols transforming, and I'm just seeing this right in front of me right now in the American Congress Hall, you have one fasces left and one fasces right, which is, the symbol of the Roman Empire. So much for symbolic co-optation and development. And I always think it's interesting if people then say, oh, this document, no matter how old and no matter the original intent or actual content, got associated with this or that individual or group. So now I don't like it anymore. And I'm thinking, like, if people only knew that so many of the celebrities and so on, they love so much, what's happening, let's say, in the background of that, all the not so pretty dealings, and they would be equally skeptical, critical, and equally quick to discard it, there would be no more songs playing in the radio, most probably.
That's so true, man. You're exactly right. It's really crazy. One more point about this that I think you'll find interesting. I'm going to read this here. The Ora Linda book also claims that Europe was ruled by a mostly peaceful, just matriarchy for most of its history.
Here we go. And that's why it has to be a hoax,
And
doesn't fit.
And that the Frisians invented writing. Let's see, there is a dark side too. Parts of the Ora Linda books have touches of bigotry and intolerance, which will be galling to most modern readers. And this mix of themes has led to a continued fascination with this text, regardless of its authenticity. It's funny, the whole, as soon as a culture decides something's wrong, it becomes evil. Or back when populations were conquering each other and taking over things, the conquering force would come in, and whatever the prevailing metaphysical beliefs were at that time would all be demonized. As a matter of fact, a lot of the so-called demons that we know now were originally
the gods of our defeated enemies, right?
Yes, exactly.
Supposed establishment enemies. Yeah, even just with Pan and many depictions of the devil, and of course there's a whole thing to go into in terms of all the levels and layers of Lucifer and Baphomet, and seeing that neutrally, again referring to secret teachings of all ages, Kabbalistic keys of the creation of man to anyone who's interested. But on the most simple level, this is Cernunnos, the, however you would call it, Germanic god of, winter and nature and Pan and so on. And then some Christians made basically the personified deity of nature itself out to be the devil. I mean, how much more twisted can you get, right?
I know, it's really, man, those guys had some fucked up ideas. They really did. Well, that's what happens when you adhere to dogma without thinking yourself. That's kind of.
Just one thing briefly, and I'd be curious as to your thoughts on that. Most simply, we recently had a show with Jim on Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, highest recommendation. They also have some very interesting, storyline and symbology. And the one thing that came to mind for me was that the Christian cross, when you measure it, at least the depictions I found, then the horizontal bar would be precisely above the sixth part, let's say, or the second part counted from above. If it has a total of, I believe in this case, 7 parts. So it would be right above. So either encouraging or blocking, let's say, the third eye, if I would correlate it to the chakra system. However, the Cathar cross, which were also greatly prosecuted as far as I understand, they actually have the circle with a perfectly, I guess you would call it, square or centered, a plus sign cross in the middle, which, as Jim pointed out, of course, also is the alchemical symbol for Earth itself. And I was kind of contemplating this, also thinking in terms of polarization. Ra in Law of One talks about this, and about the idea of negative polarization, where you use the lower 3 chakras, then skip the heart and the throat, and directly connect to the third eye. And since this horizontal bar in the cross, and that's the most famous symbol, is on top of the third eye, I'm wondering if that's kind of the idea where they want to shift the energy to. So kind of, let's say, away from the heart towards the brain in terms of a mental control freak type idea. Or if it's about, blocking the third eye. I'm not exactly sure what it would mean symbolically, but I'd be interested if you have any intuitions about that.
It is.
Go ahead.
It is everything in the circle. Every symbol is in the circle is for Ewigkeit.
Eternity, yeah.
And on the other hand, it is for just every symbol to be caught. For your third eye, when it is singled out in a circle, the out of the circle are the goddess. In the circle, there's a problem that we can't see everything.
Bryan, what's your take?
That's true. The Christian cross. I ran across some information where it's sort of structured. If you lay it over the tree of life and the Sephirah, it really connects to that scenario. Like the points that the top of the cross and the outer points of the horizontal bar, that's the upper trinity of the
Oh, then it
tree
should
of
be
life.
that. It should be that actually. So in the center should be that, which actually would be great, But to me, at least in terms of how they outwardly act, it seems more like blocking the third eye. Again, I have to bring it up again. Makes me think of this plaza in Italy where they have the huge pineal cone, or DMT pineal gland, and the huge black sarcophagus right on front of it, which to me seems more like the idea of burying it or something than promoting it. But definitely what you're pointing out is very interesting. And just for reference, that is the 11th Sephirah, which is also called the hidden one.
Exactly.
And actually is the fruit of the tree of knowledge, actually, right?
Exactly. Which they don't want you to know.
Yeah, seems so, right?
What's curious about symbols is, it's a symbol is just a graphic representation of a concept, and we were just talking about the plus sign in the circle being the symbol for Earth, but like if you extend those, if you extend the arms of the plus sign of the cross out so that they break outside of the circle just a little bit, all of a sudden it's now a symbol for the demon Mammon. So it's like these two divergent things, and it's not really the actual shape or the symbol itself, but it's the intent and the energy that's put forth behind that. And that's why some symbols, like the Christian cross, if you think about how many billions of people have used that as a symbol, man, that's got some power behind it, and that's a really deeply ingrained symbol that comes with a lifetime's worth of meanings and things to act on. So that's pretty much what I had to say about that. Yeah.
Just briefly, Mark, before you comment, Bryan, is there another book you'd like to mention, just to make sure?
There is one that I want to bring up that's not a classical grimoire, but something that I think is one of the most magical and intensely beautiful and craziest books I've ever run across, and that's the Voynich manuscript. Have you ever heard of that? The
Voynich, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, dude, that book, they still can't. People keep coming out saying they have it deciphered, but I think that there recently has been some people that may have actually played off of that, and I think it comes off of an old, out of old Arabic, but I'm not sure about that. I need to go back and look at that again because I just briefly glanced over that. But that book is from beginning to end. And that's the perfect example of where I started all of this with talking about keeping your information secret. Because the best code crackers in the, well, first of all, description of the book. It's very old. It's handmade. There's only one of them, and it is filled with illustrations showing really bizarre plants and processes with those plants that are done with little illustrations, and a lot of text, but a text written in a language. I think it's Turkish. Yeah, that's it. It's in a language no one can decipher, and they've had code crackers. The best people in the world have tried to crack that code, and nobody's been successful yet, which I think is just amazing and makes me want to know even more. Please,
Totally.
what does it say?
What this reminds me of is the Codex Seraphinianus, which apparently really, quote unquote, is a work of art. Although if you look at the Codex Seraphinianus, well, I don't know how anyone could potentially come up with this unless, I was about to say, you have severe mental illness. Doesn't have to be illness, but let's say very special configuration. This type of thing must be channeled, because with like a normal logical reasoning mind, you could never come up with it. So even if that particular one is only an art project, it's incredibly amazing. Like you look at things like a crocodile transforming into a woman, and like the most, it always seems like a kind of manual and descriptions and like different sequences. So you always try to make logical connections, and there can be some can be made, but at the same time it's completely absurd. So I guess a great read given the current times.
That sounds amazing. And the Voynich manuscript, even if it's just nonsense, it's so amazingly beautiful that it's so way worth a check out. So I guess, on that note, it's probably a good time to end. And I do have a number of other ones I'd love to talk about at some future date, but we'll close it down for now.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Bryan. Yeah, Mark, any last comments you'd like to add?
I hope we will talk in the after talk further.
We'll have time. I guess Bryan will stick around for a bit.
Sure.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect.
So,
one thing. I was on the search of literature after the Second World War. The Russians and the Americans were searching for magic books, and I found the Melanicon. It was written in Prague, in Eastern Europe, and there are certain images in it, and they are held for to describe the path to the eternal life. So I will talk to you and give you the links later. The excerpt of this was, there are two forms of these cards of the eternal life. And the true definition of eternal life achieving are the Lucifer versions. That means the Aristotelian version is a fraud. It is a different way of life, no? And this I wanted to tell at first.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So this is called the Melanicon Novem Portis. Right. Yes. So this is also connected to the Necronomicon, it seems. Maybe you would like to say one more sentence about that one, Bryan. I'm sure you're familiar.
Well, the Necronomicon is the thing that got me started on my road, like in seriousness. I was in a used bookstore. That book called my name off a top shelf. I went to buy it. I looked at it. I didn't have the cash at the time. I had to go out of town. thought about that book, obsessed about it. There were like pencil writings in there that the person that had used it before had actually been working in the book. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to have this. I went on my trip, got back 2 weeks later, didn't even go home first. I went straight to the bookstore, and the person said, oh, dude, somebody just brought that book back like 15 minutes ago. And they had a really weird look on their face. And I said, fine, let me wrap it up. So I took that book home and dove into it head first. And one of the best things about that book was the freaking bibliography. And that's where I first got exposed to the Crowley books, to Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings, on and on, the Magus, Barrett's The Magus. Like, my first little acquisition of a magical library all came from that book. And that's kind of an interesting tie back to the Aura Linda book, because, you know, they bang on its authenticity, and the Necronomicon gets the same thing. Like, it's just a work of fiction. But I can tell you from personal experience, doing some of those rituals actually do have effect. It's not like it's just like nothing, you know. May not be the mythical book of Abdul al-Hazred, the mad Arab that they said it was, but man, it's really, really intense magical book. And from that moment on, I've been really dedicated to my magical path. So yeah, that's a very interesting book.
So what I have to admit is that friends are out there, and friends hear with a voice. They got this talent, and I have a short text. It's a march on text I want to tell you, or on this tape with my address if you want.
Sure, that would be awesome.
It is a march on text. Brothers and sisters of the spirit, world leadership has been in history a great theme. Since Alexander the Great until the New World Order, there is a greed to lead. But what about our souls? What use is the world if our soul is damaged? So, the divine great pyramid of people is something we rely on. Pronounced in the hill that has been organization of goodness since late time and immemorial. I'm sorry about my English. Last sentences: with God, so that we can be free. You have to know the place in front of the Lord. We won't turn out. The rock in the surf is our good. We will continue to march to the end of every day. Be there, if it is said, what will be the time of the world's championships. blackeagle.cracker.info is in international languages to translate and to join for God and his power.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today too. I enjoyed having you participate.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Awesome. So actually, for closing out, we're gonna play a track by Sorrow, and guess what the name is called? It's called the name is Voynich Dubplate RIP, and I believe even here I got exposed to that particular naming as a title of a dubstep track before I actually found it was a real thing. Anyhow, you know, funny how synchronicity works.
Yes, it is.
Dubstep, always a good place. Yeah, Brian?
Hey, can I put in a quick pitch for my tarot deck really quick before we go?
Yeah. Anytime, every time, all the time.
Yeah, if you guys are interested in a tarot deck, and there's a companion deck that's an angel deck. People have really been digging them and enjoying them. And if you're interested in supporting the cause, please pick one up. You can get it off my website. That's Wyzard, and that's Wyzard with a Y of odd.com. And sorry for the sorry for the sell spiel, but it'd be awesome. So
Well, everyone, as I always say, everyone should get these decks anyhow. I got both of them at least, and quite a few of my friends by now got them too, of course, because they, realized the supreme quality, synchronicity, and all the other words that don't come to mind right now of this particular deck. So, highest recommendation. Thanks so much, Bryan, for sharing. And in any case, anyone check out your website because there's images, of course, of the deck. And, at least do yourself the favor and look at those amazing images and that technique. Also, of course, your most recently developed light paintings that you started to share. So, yeah, most amazing art, most etheric and magical. So, thank you very much, Bryan.
thank you, Raphael. We'll see you next time.
Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk, Radio Okitalk.